So if you weren't aware, recently in the RLCS, they changed the rule for SSA. RLCS SSA. Previously, you could only play SSA from sub-Saharan African countries. Mostly, I don't know exactly the rules on that, but for the most part, you saw countries from there play in the region. You know, for the biggest countries I remember seeing in there was South Africa, Reunion, and maybe even a little bit of Madagascar. Other than that, I'm sure there were other exceptions, but I can't point them out right now. But yeah, now they've changed the ruling where you can compete from anywhere. Difference is though is that you have to play from from your own. If you're playing from your own region, you'd have a lot higher ping because you still have to play on the servers of the region that you're playing in. You just don't have to live there. That was the previous rule, is you have to live there. So you could kind of move regions if you really wanted to. You can move to SSA and play there, but you'd have to implement yourself into the culture, into the region. So it's much more effort. Whereas now, you can play from your bedroom in any region that you want to, knowing you have to play on higher ping. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about EU playing in SSA. They get about 180, 200, maybe slightly less, slightly more, paying to play in SSA. And yeah, I'm basically going to talk about what I think of this rule change. Ethically speaking, is it right? Is it good? Is it bad? And I already spoil you my opinion. I think it's a bad change. Now, reasons as to why I think it's a bad change are, well, when you look at from SSA's perspective, there have been 12 RLCS seasons now. 10 of those were without SSA, and SSA as well are playing from a region where resources are not that great in comparison to Europe, for example, where their internet might not be that great. A lot of time they have load shedding. They won't have electricity or something along those lines. You might have seen that headline of Olympic playing on his his family or his car's engine or something like that, charging the electricity of his house or whatever it was. And so basically, point being, the situation isn't as optimal in SSA as as opposed to Europe. And I add on to that with what I said earlier, is 10 of those seasons SSA 10 of those RCS seasons, SSA hasn't been involved. They haven't been allowed to compete at all for this. So for this entire time, they haven't had the motivation or anything that would lead to them being determined to get better at the game. So a lot of these players are these passionate players that have kept playing the game over the years, but have never really had the chance to compete in RLCS. And haven't grinded as thoroughly because there was no RLCS. So that also meant, both those players are not going to be as great, and there's going to be less players getting into the game as well, because in esports in general, a lot of players get into the game because there are opportunities that may come if you get better at that game, and in SSA there simply were no opportunities. And on top of that, because they haven't been in RLCS this entire time, they they um they haven't had the chance to play against, let's say, these European teams in majors, in worlds, at these LAN events to learn from them either. Because the best players in the world, 80% of the time, have been from Europe. Sometimes it's been NA, but most of the time it's been Europe. So when you're playing in Europe as somebody just launching the game for the first time, after a while you will notice that you can improve a lot quicker than people in SSA, because you've got those people at the top You got your Alpha 54s, you got your K-Dops, your Fairy Peaks, your Scrub Killers, Cookseer 97, all of the goats, right, from back in the day, or even going right now, um, who have really basically helped out the entire region, right? Because when you're playing with or against the best, you're improving a lot quicker. You learn from them. You see the mistakes a lot more clearer. Really, and that's something not just applicable to Rocket League. It's really with anything, really. Um, where if something better comes at you and shows off exactly what you're doing wrong, it allows you to see them a lot more clearly, and that's something that's helped out the entire player base in Europe throughout the years. And that kind of is it's like a pyramid, right? Is you one player will allow all the players below him to learn, and then the players below him will allow the players below them to learn. So it's something that finds its way all the way to the bottom of the barrel of the game, allowing the entire player base really to learn. So when you don't have that throughout the years, your your player base might be a lot thinned out and not as deep, let's say. So what I'm trying to ultimately say is that SSA haven't had the opportunities, and I think it would be quite an elitist thing to say that they don't deserve the opportunities because they're not good enough. I think that would be quite unfair, I think would be the best way of describing that. So yeah, I think it's a problem. When you look at it from the other perspective, why wouldn't it be a problem? Some players might say, oh, if you're losing against players who are playing on 180 ping, 200 ping, do you deserve to go to the majors? Do you deserve to go to Worlds? Which is a rule change they made this season, which is probably good, by the way, is they've included SSA. It's a good thing for SSA that they've included SSA going to majors, which is something that will allow them to improve. Problem is, those that have also allowed Europeans to have the opportunity to do that by playing in SSA. But yeah, if let's say Europeans do make it to majors by playing in SSA, doesn't that just show that the SSA players didn't deserve it if the EU guys are playing a 180 ping? Well, no, I disagree. Like I just said, they've been playing in a region where they could put into the game the same hours as SSA guys, and because of their more ideal situation, having better players around, and then even, maybe more irrelevant things like your internet and stuff like that, just the situation in a country being better will allow you to have an easier time in the game, right? But yeah, the player thing is probably more of an effective argument there. But yeah, because of that, I don't think it applies, right? I don't think the fact that you're better means anything really in when you compare the fairness to qualification for the spot. I think it's a lot more fair that the SSA players locally would be allowed to qualify rather than the ones in EU, for example. Other arguments for it being better would be the other arguments for EU being allowed to play, or other regions in general in SSA from their local servers, from their local internets to the SSA server, sorry, would be that it improves the region, right? Because when you look at APAC, they have players that last season from EU moved to APAC, and they sort of improved the region by doing so, right? Because you had all these players that were maybe at the bottom of RLCS, or maybe even below, just below that, but basically top 16 RLCS players, and then you even got like an OCE player, and they moved to APAC, and they kind of joined the best player in APAC, I would say, and formed the best team there, right? And that allowed the entire region to sort of improve. Last season, I felt like, oh, SSA, they made giant improvements, but APAC, on the other hand, also had this EU infiltration that also allowed them to kind of improve to a large degree as well. Because I was kind of thinking like SSA was at least sort of catching up last season to APAC, but really, I don't think that's true at all. It really felt like actually APAC had gotten away, has pushed away from SSA, and probably I would say due to EU and OCE and even some NA players, where they didn't quite make worlds or majors, moving to the region and improving it subsequently as well. But that does mean you're taking spots away from them. So whilst you are improving the region, and that is great, the region can also just improve by making majors themselves, right? They don't need the players to play in their region to improve. They can also just learn from playing in majors, and it's not just about making sure that the SSA players are better. It's about making sure that they get better through more normal means, right? You don't want a competition where we're just like sending all the best players to every region to make sure that every region is as good as each other. That's just like a weird way of doing it, right? They want everyone to have a more natural way. It's not because SSA has not been in a great situation to get good at the game that means we need to get them as good as possible as quick as possible. It just means that they deserve spots at the world stage that will allow them to improve, but only them, right? It's only them, not EU guys that are coming over, blah blah blah. It's just them. That doesn't mean you need to get EU people involved, even though that will improve the region as well. It's not about that. It's about the opportunities going to SSA people. It's not about the SSA region just improving. It's mainly about the SSA players having opportunities, and then secondly improving as well. That only comes second behind them having the opportunities. And regardless of EU players playing in SSA, even if they improve the players, they will take away the opportunities by doing so. So ultimately, I think it's a bad rule to have players outside of SSA being allowed to compete in SSA, you know, with their local internet connected to the SSA servers, which, you know, for EU would be 180, 200 ping. So yeah, that's kind of my arguments as to why I think it's a bad thing. Now, arguments as to who is to blame, right? Who is to blame for this ruling? And I would say, for the most part, it's the guys who decided this ruling. Or rather, who's to blame for, you know, players ending up playing in the region, right? Number one is the people that decided this rule, whether it was Psyonix, Epic, or Blast. It really doesn't matter. Whoever decided this rule were the people to blame. This is a rule they chose to change after last season, even though nobody was asking for that rule to exist. I think maybe they did it in order to simplify things, but if anything, I think it makes it more complicated. Players as well, after they play in a region, they can't switch regions until the end of the season or split. I think it's the end of the season, but it might be split. So, you know, if someone has looked at the rule book, please let me know what the correct answer is there. But I would definitely say the people that chose the rules, they're the main problem. So if you want to blame anyone, I think it should mainly go to them, but it doesn't mean you can't put it anywhere else at all. Partially the blame would also go to the players, but something I want to talk about is I don't think it's, you know, black or white. I think you got to look towards the players as, you know, don't get me wrong, they are contributing to the problem, but I don't think that looking out for your own career is something that should be judged that heavily at the expense of other people's careers that perhaps would deserve a spot more than you do. Because it's something that most people do regardless, right? When you take a job anywhere, more likely than not, there might have been a person around that either deserves it more, or because he's better, or because, you know, they're in a, sorry, I didn't mean to gender that, because they're in a worse situation or something, right? Because they're better at what they do, or they're in a situation where really it would help them out more, right? Um, so whatever way you look at it, there's probably someone out there that deserved your spot more than you do, on average. So when people take the jobs, you should also realize that you are basically doing the same, or doing at least similar, to a degree, of what these EU players are doing when they compete in SSA, and try to, you know, make a living by, you know, let's say they think they can be the best player in a region and make the majority of majors. You know, that's a giant change in their career. They go from being nobodies to, you know, from making day 2, maybe, lower day 3 runs. I guess, yeah, this season it probably would end up making 3 runs, day 3 runs. I'm referring to Young Money Clan, for example, but there are other EU teams there as well. Just the first one that I'm thinking of, it would be Young Money Clan. They probably, this season definitely would make day 3, but I don't see them getting that far into day 3. So they go from this situation where maybe they make 300 bucks, right, to from participating in one qualifier for the major, previously known as a regional, or a qualifier for a regional, um, to all of a sudden they're going to Toronto, they're going to Stockholm, they're going to, London, competing in these events with all the best players, which would allow them as well to improve more, because now they're not only playing in their little sphere of the people around them, but now they've opened up their opportunities by even scrimming the top teams. So they would not only be reaping the benefits of their own region's quality, but also the best players directly in the entire world playing against you. So, you know, for them, they're looking at that and saying, yeah, I think this is a good opportunity to achieve that. It seems a lot more closer than, playing in EU, even though it's possible that playing in EU would benefit you more in the long run. It's possible, don't get me wrong. For players that are competing in SSA, this might have been a mistake for them. Only time will tell. But even then, you know, even with time, you can't really tell what would have happened if you didn't do that. So it's kind of hard to say. But, you know, point is, they think, at least, whether it's true or not, that they can really propel their careers, by playing in SSA. So I think that's something that should be judged, but not like, you know, they've done anything crazy. You know, they should be judged, but, you know, let's still be respectful towards them. They warrant respect, unless maybe they've done things other than that you feel like they means they don't warrant respect. You know, that's not something I'll be going into. But just playing in Europe, and I'm not claiming that they have. I have no idea. But just playing as I say, from EU, whilst I think it's a bad thing, I think you should, make sure to kind of measure exactly how bad you think it is, and realize, in my opinion, that you should meet somewhere in the middle and say, okay, you've done that, but 99%, 99.999% people do similar things like that, so judge them not too much. That's what I'm trying to say. You know, meet somewhere in the middle, compromise, or contributing to a problem, as everybody is every single day of their lives. Um, but yeah, the problem that the contribution isn't crazy big, and they have, some reasoning as to why they would do it. I think the majority of the blame has to go to the people that decided the rule. I'll say it once more. Some blame goes to the players, but only a little. Only a little. That's my take on that. Anyways, that is it for me. Sorry for rambling on, for 20 minutes on that subject. I wanted to just give my opinion on that, somewhat in depth as well. But yeah, if you weren't aware, the gameplay that was playing in the background was the two SSA players, sorry, the two SSA teams that went to Worlds at the end of last season and played each other, that being Limitless and Valiant. This season there will only be one world spot for SSA, but the SSA have also gotten major spots, one major spot for every major. So that's at least, you know, a minus and a plus, but I think the plus outweighs the minus. And yeah, that's that. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you later.